Congratulations on making it back into the auditorium. I realize it is the last plenary session of a 2-day conference, and you've been in many plenary sessions and discussions. I do not know if I have lost those attendees in the coffee break to the coffee. I have no idea, but we are going to start. I'm going to ask you as you come into the room to come into the room and be as quiet as you possibly can. This plenary, you will need an interpretation device. I hope one is nearby and you have it to hand. Every single plenary that we've had,
Testing the English channel.
well, this last one really resonates with so many of us and our communities. Rethinking mobility for more and better jobs. I want to introduce you to your speakers. Samsi Ganata is Secretary of Mobility in Bali, Indonesia. Samsi, could you go right to the very end? Thank you. Right to the very end. Appreciate that. Actually, perfect. Yes, because we've got way more chairs than we started off with. Okay, very good. All right, great. Giulio Cassioni is the director of the Metro in Sao Paulo. Has anybody been on the Sao Paulo Metro? Okay. If you've got any problems, this is the man to talk to. Giulio, thank you. Please take a seat. Appreciate you. Andrew Huskowitz is the Executive Director of ODI North America. Andy, thank you. Please take a chair. Now, Raman has told me, just call me Raman, because his first name is Siva Subrahmanyam Raman. So Raman, thank you. Please join us on the stage. Really good to have you. Chairman, he was only trying to help me. Thank you, Raman. And Managing Director, Small Industries Development Bank of India. And Felipe Ramirez is Urban Mobility Director, WRI Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. Gentlemen, it's good to have you. You can curve your chairs at the end just a little bit so that you can see each other, so that you're not all just staring at each other's ears. Okay, very good, beautiful. When I saw this title, Rethinking Mobility for More and Better Jobs, I was thinking, well, this session doesn't have a keynote, but it should have a keynote question. Jeremy, hello. Come up to the microphone. Jeremy asked such a pertinent question in the last plenary that I'm bringing it back for a sequel so we can really focus on the content of that question. Jeremy, introduce yourself one more time, please.
Thank you, Femi. So I'm Jeremy Anderson. I'm from the International Transport Workers Federation, and we represent 20 million transport workers globally. And going back to my question earlier, I'd like to ask the panel to think about in this session, when we talk about resilience, how do we make sure that we include supporting resilience for the workforce when we think about resilience? And when we talk about creating more jobs, how do we make sure that these are decent jobs, particularly in line with the standards set out in SDG 8, my favorite SDG? Thank you.
Thank you for your keynote question. I appreciate that. All right, gentlemen, when we're thinking about rethinking mobility, Felipe, what does that mean for you at the WI? Just rethinking it in the context of work and jobs.
Thank you, Femi. I would like to start saying that we have to divide this in two different things. The first one is the jobs that are created by the transport itself. So that means drivers, maintenance, people who help on the operation side. And this has to be, again, divided in two, because this is a male-centric business, unfortunately, and how we manage to include more of the women that actually do a better work in many stages of the transport system. So actually women have shown doing better work than men in so many stages. And
better
then
drivers
and maintenance, actually. And of course, directors and operations, that's also something that we are all know here. And then on the other hand, we all know that the bond between the economic development and the people is actually transportation. And that means that when we have quality transport services, we're also giving accessibility for people in our cities, for jobs, again, for health, for different kind of things, such as education as well. And then when thinking about that, we have to acknowledge that there is, especially again, women who are what I call hidden non-delivered trips. And that means that there's people who cannot really travel at all when they want to travel because they are probably caregivers or they don't have the opportunity. So when we are talking about jobs, we have to think how we can improve in a better way the opportunities, accessibility that we are providing to everyone. And then we need to go deeper. If you ask me a few years ago when I started working, well, a few years ago, no, a long time ago, when I started working in transportation, how we were designing the transport systems was thinking only on the first very peak hour of the day. And that means that most of the transport systems were designed for just thinking on how people was working, but not what caregivers have to do before going to work, or even more, these hidden trips that I'm talking about that were not, of course, covered when we were designing the systems. So now we have to think more on how we build on that. And I would like to answer Jeremy, but maybe later about your question, because I think informal transport systems play a big role here and how we can provide better jobs for people who works in informal systems, which actually around the world is 60% of informality. So we need to work more on how we are going to involve that people and provide better jobs for these people as well.
Raman, that whole rethinking process, if you're a financial institution, how does that play out? What does that look like?
So I just like to talk about the fact that the entire mobility space is in a way suddenly dominated by what we call as the delivery system. I don't think we would have seen this pre-COVID. Suddenly after COVID, nobody wants to step out and buy anything, and you're just sitting at home and expect everything to be delivered. So I'm just trying to say that there is a sudden change in the world. We've seen a huge surge in the sales of two-wheelers. The two-wheeler company OEMs are, sort of wringing their bank balances. So we do not really envisage that you're going to have a, sort of slowdown in the sort of employment opportunities or the job opportunities. And when we're talking about mobility in the two-wheeler and three-wheeler space, I think in India, we've seen a surge in the number of persons who are doing that delivery. And therefore, we've seen from a financing point of view, the fact that we've got some amazing fintechs which are working on the data relating to the trips made by these delivery subsegment. Now, that data is what's helping a bank like ours to be able to take that bold step and give them a loan for their two-wheeler, which till yesterday, we would never have done. We're just too risk averse. So let me say it in this way, that one is the access to credit. The second is the affordability of credit. Both things are now working to the advantage of these entrepreneurs.
Samsi, I'd love you to share with the transport system in Bali, transforming that and how you've managed to do it and also protect the workforce, create better jobs for them.
Okay, for most of transporters actually a bit got a difficult situation when we find that we have the system which is actually not fit with the theory. Bali is actually an area of tourism. Then we have 5.3 million of people, but every year we have around 12 million of people coming from other part of the world. Then they don't have their own car. Then in the meantime, we try to push our people who actually have motorcycle to go to the bus, but we have tourists who don't actually use their own motorcycle, use their own cars. So what I think is actually, let's see the other way around. then find who actually need the transportation. Then see that case actually we try to shift the use of private mobility to more to public transport. So actually since 2020, actually we start with the new bus system. Then we try to do people actually shift to the public transport, but it is still quite difficult. Yeah.
If you were going to take us somewhere in Bali to show off, like this, I'm really proud to show you this, where would you take us? Describe it.
Maybe I think I'll take you to Ubud, to the place where it is actually used to be very difficult to reach, but now you can get in quite easy.
Where is that place?
It is in a center part of Bali.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what makes it easier to get there now?
Because you have public transport get in, and then you can walk in the Ubud area now, then get the shuttle. Yeah.
Julio, I'm really interested in how you see green transition from the perspective of running Sao Paulo Metro. What is green about it? How's that transition going?
Olha, obrigado pela pergunta.
Thank you for your question. As you know, I come from Brazil. It is a large country with very large figures. 12 million inhabitants in the city of São Paulo. In the metropolitan area, reaches 20 million inhabitants. However, resources, as elsewhere in the world, are scarce. And whenever we talk about a green agenda for the metro, we never lose sight of the fact that we want to serve those that need it the most. We need a service network that has to be expanded, and it has to reach those most remote destinations from downtown São Paulo. Just so you can understand this a little better, today, São Paulo's urban train and metro network totals around 380 kilometers. We plan to invest in order to reach 600 kilometers by 2040, because the metro company truly believes that a smart city, a connected city, a sustainable city, a green city requires great quality and great availability of quality mobility services. And I need to point out that we value these aspects. We need mobility for smart, sustainable cities. And I want to talk about how Metro translates those concepts, those values, which are in theory, into action. Right now, we are expanding multiple existing lines. I will mention some of them. For example, on the east side of the city, there is a highly vulnerable neighborhood. Socioeconomically speaking, Line 2 is being extended with support from the IDB, historical levels of support between the IDB and the São Paulo Metro. There's significant funding in telecommunications and systems taking place. Also, on the east side, we have Line 15, a monorail, and we are recovering Line 17 downtown. My colleague Sergio Aveledo, known to many of us, we heard him talk about Line 4. We received authorization from the Public Debt Oversight Organization in Brazil in order to allow Line 4 to go outside of the city of São Paulo. I could list multiple additional examples, Line 16, 19, 20, 22, but at the end of the day, our commitment is with a sustainable future. We want mobility to be available for those who live very far from the center so that they can build economic value in their lives. And I would say that today, if Line Today was finalized, if it was running, a worker who in the past or cannot find jobs, for example, in the city of São Bernardo do Campo, one of many cities that are within the metropolitan region, somebody who couldn't find a job there, once Line 20 is fully operational, that worker could reach São Paulo. They could reach potential for jobs. 50% of the range of jobs available, over 70% would be at this person's reach if they could ride Line 20 at a fair price, at a rate that would be equivalent to no more than $1. Of course, it's a challenge. It's a tricky conversion, but just to give you some idea of what we are trying to accomplish in São Paulo to bring transportation and dignity for those who need it the most. And just in closing, very briefly, I want to mention that Brazil's economic growth history has had its ups and downs. My generation's very accustomed to a phrase which says, Brazil is always the country of the future, a future that never comes. And of course, there's some humor, which is something that's very Brazilian. We want to live life with humor, but it also conveys the suspicious nature with which stance with which we face the future. And São Paulo Metro wants to finally have that sustainable long-term growth. We need to reaffirm the city's vocation for growth. Historically, a city is born and it develops in order to connect people so that they can be connected to assets, to goods, to jobs. If not, a city is dysfunctional. And even more than that, it goes against its own reason for existing. So in Brazil, we seek to attain long-term sustainability if we support our projects on green sustainability.
Sustainability, that what comes out the other side are better jobs, green jobs, better economy. Where have you seen that working in the work that you've been doing?
Sustainability isn't necessarily what's going to drive the new market. It's just the market is heading in this direction anyway. Right? This is where we're headed. It's going to be ultimately cost that drives the new economy. And I think what we have to do is we have to make sure that the least developed countries in the world, the low income countries, some of the most underserved people participate in this. And I have actually tremendous confidence that they're going to participate in this. I want to share a little story. One of my first forays into international development was when I was 21 years old, living in a small village in Nicaragua. And at the time, I was very skeptical of what USAID and the World Bank and everyone did. And I was living, on a beach as a volunteer. They would come to town and I'd always roll my eyes as they pulled up in their Land Rovers with their khaki pants and one day suddenly they showed up and every able-bodied person in town was being employed to help build roads in the town. There were only dirt roads in the town and everyone was given little blocks. And for about 3 weeks, every able-bodied person in the town was help building those roads, just over, just not that big, maybe 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers worth of roads. I saw a complete transformation in that town because of that one small project, because what happened was not only did they now have paved roads, but everybody had a little bit of extra cash in their pocket. And the fisherman who previously would sell his fish to a middleman suddenly bought a cooler. And then he was able to be the middleman under that. Another person took the extra cash and they used that to buy a refrigerator, to sell Coca-Cola and things like that, made a little extra cash. When you think back about how the United States transformed to be the country where it is today, it was all investments in transport. It was the railroads where everybody was employed. Towns grew up all around, along the railroad lines, and it was the superhighways. I used to, at the time, and this is a little dated, I'd say in the United States, anywhere in the country, you can find a Blockbuster video and a McDonald's. We don't have the Blockbuster videos anymore, but in the most rural areas. But it's all because of investments in transport. Now, we're going to see a transformation right now, but in ways that we can't even imagine because the technologies are still being developed. And the linkages between transport and job creation, it goes beyond job creation. It goes to electrification of people as well. It goes to transport of water and water access. So when I think through, even if you take Africa, for example, you see companies, and I mentioned this, I think the other day, a company called Ampersand in Rwanda, which is doing electric two-wheelers with rechargeable, swappable batteries. That's creating jobs for taxi drivers. But there's other companies that are selling the two-wheelers for people who can afford them. But you need to have a company that can charge the batteries. That helps create space for development of microgrids. Microgrids that provide electrification, but that don't necessarily have enough off-takers. That's going to create a whole other microeconomy. Having those two-wheelers and three-wheelers allow you to transport things like LPG for cooking, so that people no longer have to use charcoal, no longer have to use biomass and wood. They'll be able to get water. All of these SDGs are going to get solved by some of the new by some of these new transport solutions. So I'm actually, whether it's being driven by sustainability or not, all this is going to be driven by people's desire to have meaningful jobs. So when you talk about resilience and what's going to happen to the bus drivers and the people who are driving trains, I'm not concerned about that, because there are going to be plenty of great jobs that we can't even imagine today that's going to be happening because of this new green economy.
Julio, you're nodding. Articulate the nod.
He was being polite.
No, it was a very enthusiastic nod. So, Julio, let me do it in a little longer sentence for the interpreters. So, as Andy was speaking, you were doing this.
I'm sorry. The
Why?
translation service no work. Now. Eu concordava porque
I was agreeing because we see the same prospects of playing out in Brazil. We look at the different countries, different types of cities and different cultures, but the background, that is, the problems seem to all be the same ones. And so we see, for example, how the unions are striving to hold on to jobs under the current systems of transportation that exist. But our hope is that there's going to be a higher skilled work. And so we want to ensure that the current jobs persist, but we can't keep there from happening this disruption caused by innovative technology. Now, we just have to win people over, win the workers over through respectful dialogue in a very democratic, inclusive way, because a green economy means there has to be training for skilled jobs, new technologies, changes in the value chain, supply chain. And these people that see this as an opportunity, not just will have access to better jobs, but this is indeed going to be something more compatible with what their needs are.
Wondering where the new jobs are. Where are you seeing opportunity, potential, or actual new jobs from the work that you're doing?
The shift to e-mobility is certainly creating a series of new functions. So, I mean, let me put it this way: when the mobile phone came in, at least in India, nobody wished to throw away a mobile phone and buy a new one. They were only looking at who can repair this. And today, in every street in India, especially in the cities, you've got these mobile repair shops. There could be countless number of them. So I'm just looking at that, and we've already seen some smart, fleet operators. They've come together and they're training the, sort of what we call as the para engineer. So you don't have an engineering degree. You go to a diploma school and you get yourself some kind of a basic engineering course. But these guys abound in the country, and we're now seeing these gentlemen being put onto the job of repairing the EV. Now, they've even got into the act of pulling out the old battery and replacing those particular cells which are damaged and getting that battery to go back into the ecosystem. So there's a huge profit motive. So just think of it. I mean, there's a battery which somebody's saying is no longer available. It's discarded. But this smart young man is now repairing it, and the profit is entirely his. So I'm just looking at, and the point which was made by James, is that right? Jeremy? Yeah. I mean, I think we should only look at it from a point of view of us, utilizing the new technology, getting the better of the new technology. And I'm sure more and more jobs would end up coming up. I mean, it's bound to happen.
Andy and then Felipe.
Sure. So I'm gonna give a micro example and a macro example of the job opportunities. And one I gave the other day during a session was a company called Liquid Star, which has a small mini grid in Djibouti. And they started doing this with the idea of charging batteries to use battery swapping for two-wheelers so that people could, basically earn some income from that. But they realized they could also generate other income from purifying water with the mini grid. And they also could earn some income from doing basically selling electricity for cryptocurrency for mining, and also for localized AI learning, which requires electricity. All of these different potential income streams are being developed, all by one company that has just one small little mini grid. We can't even imagine the types of revenue streams that are going to be created for everything that they started this because of transport. The macro example I'll give, though, is if we look at Francophone West Africa and you think about that corridor that runs from Abidjan to Lagos, along that corridor, the African Development Bank is talking about creating a superhighway that will connect all of those coastal cities. That some of them, there's going to be hundreds of millions of people living in those coastal cities by the end of the century. You look at the Togo and Benin, which are part of that corridor, they've got deep water ports, which give them incredible access to the Atlantic. And then they go up into the Sahel with Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, which have tremendous resources that are going to drive the green energy transition. Every aspect of that to make that ecosystem work is going to drive transport, making sure you've got good roads going into the Sahel, which are going to help pull out some of the resources, creating jobs as you do refining all along that route, hopefully maybe doing some manufacturing in coastal West Africa and then exporting to the rest of the world. And it doesn't stop just at the port, because the ships themselves are going to be driving new technological development. One of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases is shipping. As people talk about small modular nuclear technologies, one of the things that probably within the next 50, 80 years, you're going to start probably seeing ships move towards small modular nuclear as well. And so we're already using basically small modular nuclear for, in Antarctica and the Arctic to do ice cutters because they're intensive. But eventually the costs will come down. The technologies hopefully will get safer. People will be more comfortable with it. And we're going to transform our shipping economy as well. All of this is creating an economy that none of us can even imagine. It's going to create green jobs all throughout the ecosystem.
Are we talking 50, 60, 70 years, though, Andy?
Well,
because
look,
I know that stretch of West Africa.
Some people tell you it's 5 years. All right, like I sat with former Secretary of Energy Rick Perry about 5 years ago, and I said, "All right, this small modular nuclear stuff, when's this going to be commercialized?" He said, "Within like 5 years." It's taken a little bit of a step back, but I tend to be concerned. In the grand scheme of things in our lives, 50 years is not a long time. It's not a long time. This is going to happen. It may be in 10, 20 years. Think about, I was visiting the auto museum in Los Angeles a few weeks ago, and I was looking at the headlines from 2011 saying EVs are dead, Tesla's going nowhere. All of these headlines from Forbes and all these things. Think about where we are.
How's Tesla doing?
It's doing pretty okay, I think, So it's doing okay. But EVs are doing, everyone wants to say EVs are dead. EVs are not dead.
They're just resting.
No, you know what it is? There was a big surge in the U.S. market because there were incentives, and the people who can afford them went out. And I don't own an EV, and I make plenty of money because I'm still waiting.
What are you waiting for? 50 years time?
I'm waiting there's an EV that can have 400, 500-mile range. Okay. Don't have to worry about it. I'm waiting. I want to know that I can get where I need to go. It's not that I'm not going to buy an EV. I'm going to do it. But a lot of people are in the same way. People can't afford it. People will start making less and less expensive vehicles. Everybody will be able to afford them. It's going to become the norm. That'll probably happen in 5 to 10 years. Like, it's happening a lot more quickly than people expected. You wanted something lively, right? So
this is good. I'm loving it. All right, Felipe, and then Julia, I know you've got a ports background, so I know that you have extra thoughts there. Hold on to that thought. Felipe, first of all.
Yeah, no, I only wanted to bring some of the perspective of the developing world and what's happening on the ground and all this technology arriving to our cities in the developing world and how fast it's arriving. And yes, I think it's bringing a lot of new jobs. But what really is happening in many places, in India, in Indonesia, in Colombia, and I can bring the experience that I had when I was the Secretary of Mobility there. A lot of works were created But the main issue was that we didn't have the ability, we were not capable to train as fast as we needed the people that actually we were needing in the transport system. So that was a big issue because, yes, of course, jobs are being created, but then the developing world is not having this capacity of training. And let me explain why is this, because we have a lot of barriers on how to train our people. And this has to be with the informality, this has to be with the fact that the system is very man-centric. And what we discovered, at least in Bogota when we did this, is actually that these barriers were going beyond this training system or other things. So as an example, what happened in Bogota is when we were inviting women to participate in the transport system, they were willing to do it. But then who was going to take care of their children? Or even worse, who was going to pay for the licensed driver when they didn't have the first wage? So we had to think different strategies in order to be able to pay for these kind of things so they can start working. So I agree with you, all of you, that these kind of jobs are being created and it's going very fast and it's fascinating. But definitely we need to start thinking also on these kind of barriers, especially in the developing world where a lot of things has to happen.
Felipe,
and here, sorry.
No, go. I was picking up on you. Carry on.
All right. Yeah, I just want to also finish that's like part of the opportunity. But then also I want to invite the crowd here because people here can influence a lot of things in the world. And if you ask me how we can then help this to happen more accelerated, or how we can help people in the developing world to work in these kind of things. So I think we have a very nice opportunity, and it's at a very high level. The NDCs, the next round of NDCs is happening on 2025. And ideally, we should include some of the targets in these NDCs. Why is this? Because informality, for example, is not included in the NDCs, or even not going a little bit behind. Not transport is included in many NDCs in the world. So we should influence different countries so they include these targets, and we are able then to make the shift to happen, the change to happen. So they have these other targets, thinking not only on the opportunity that we have, because yes, industry is going very fast, but then we also need that governments can help their citizens in order to be able to connect these two worlds that are completely different.
We have about 12 minutes left in this session. Please stand by the microphone. If you've got a question, don't leave it till right at the end. And then we can bring in your questions into the conversation. Raman, hold that thought for a second, because I asked Julio about ports, because Andy brought up ports in this vision, this such a positive vision for the future. And I know you've got a ports background. Your insight, please.
Now, when I hear Andy talking about prospects of the future, I get very excited. I agree with what everyone on the panel is saying. It may seem that everything we are imagining now is actually going to come to pass in a short order, because we see that the transformation, the rate of transformation of change is faster than we've ever seen before. But we need to focus on the here and the now and not get ahead of ourselves. So both the ports as well as urban transportation systems in Brazil, there is a social pressure. The Brazilian citizens have pressured the country to make sure that the state-run enterprises are more effective, efficient, and actually deliver the goods in practical terms. So in São Paulo, I see no one is tolerant of state-run enterprises that are running a deficit. They have to have their financials on good footing. And so the population is expecting this, demanding this. And so this need has meant that we have had to innovate in sources of energy. For example, we've got our two main elements. We've got the cost of electricity on one hand, and labor costs. These are the two major inputs And our energy power system is quite clean compared to the rest of the world, but that's not enough for us. We have a project in Sao Paulo. By 2030, we want to have at least 20% of our electrical power, the power that we consume, to be self-generating based on photovoltaic cells, talking about solar panels. Now, by 2032, we have this bold hope that we will achieve 40% of what we consume being produced in our city through solar farms. That don't have to be in the city proper. They can be on the outskirts. And that also brings us socio-environmental benefits.
My name's Alana, and I'm from the International Transport Workers Federation. We represent 20 million workers from all the different transport sectors. And I've listened to all the speakers, and obviously jobs is a major equity issue. And I think if we are serious about equity, then central to the social impact of investment in transport must be decent jobs, which is what Jeremy emphasized earlier. Not just new jobs, not just green jobs, but decent jobs. And I would argue that there's a link between quality jobs and quality services. So I would really like to know from all the speakers what your perspective is on what a just transition to decent work should look like. And how would this involve the current workforce, using all the knowledge, skills, and experience that they have of moving transport every day. Thanks.
Thank you. Samsi, will you start that, please?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think so in our case, actually, it is really difficult to find a decent job for people who actually use the transport as a side job. So for example, if you are on a motor taxi, for example, then you will use your job as a side job because you have to do something else in your community. So community service is number one for them. So it is for us actually. Let's find the best way for them to easier for them to serve the community. So let's take the people closer to them, and then they do the service with a smaller area. Then it will be better for them. Then it's easy for them to serve the community at any time they want to do that.
Roman, do you have thoughts?
So I was just responding to that point made, and earlier what Felipe was also saying, that if we were to go down to that segment of the nano enterprises, and I'm really talking nano as in extremely tiny individual businesses, we've actually worked with a group called Self-Employed Women's Association, which the acronym is SEVA, which in Hindi means service. Now, there are 2.9 million women who are doing some small activity in their houses. We've found that most of them need some transport to take their goods to the market. Now, we brought in the EV to 200 such women as a complete experiment. And that's in just 3 months, we've seen the results. Somewhere the EV is seen to be an easier vehicle to drive. You actually sit at home and it gets charged. You don't stand in line, which typically if you're on a three-wheeler, on a CNG three-wheeler, which is quite popular, you end up waiting for 2 hours to refill the CNG. So, I think we still have to discover the benefits of e-mobility. We have to discover the benefits of clean energy, and the empowerment to women is apparently there. I mean, we need to now explore it. So we're actually now launching this program with SEVA to go across. We probably will not get to 2.9 million very soon, but I mean, we just have to go across. And the benefit really is that when they serve as a group, there is that sort of peer pressure within the group and a peer support amongst the women. So, you are actually looking at the ability to lower your risk and provide them that additional capital to buy an EV at cheaper rates, because they probably are a much more assured and a less risky group.
Felipe, just wrap up this one before we go to the next question, please.
Sure, very quick. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the main problem is that 60% of jobs around the world are informal, right? And this can be up to 80% in some countries, which makes this conversation, I think, very difficult. And then talking about transportation, drivers have to work for long hours. They are obligated to speed up so they make the most money out of what they are doing. And these kind of things are making their job very difficult. But we cannot transition from informality to formality just like that, because then the main problem is what this conference is about, the financing, how to put the right money into what we want. And if we do that, actually, what we will do is actually destroy thousands of jobs. As you are saying, we need to use this workforce that the cities already have and train them in a better way. So we need to understand how to do that transition. And that's actually what we're going to talk about. I think it's tomorrow, the paratransit roundtable that we're having. And it's the second time we're doing this in the context of transforming transportation, to understand what other tools we have in order to be able to tackle these kind of things. And of course, gender equity, it's a principal topic here. How we use technology, as you are saying, this increase in technology, these advances that we are having, that we know we need to train so many people now. Well, if it's new people that we need to train, why don't we train women that are willing to work on this and understand what kind of barriers the world have been putting on them in order to be able, so it's preventing them to be able to access this kind of jobs. This is the kind of conversations we should be having and accelerate this transition in order to be able to have more women in these specific jobs, and also use the workforce that we already have, but not go straight forward from informality to formality.
So the last time I wanted to ask you something was, the women wanted childcare. Did you find the childcare, or did you just say childcare is an issue for women?
No way. It's how we work in terms of caregivers in order to be able to provide what they are needing, and not that is not something that prevent them to be able to access jobs.
Right. Okay.
That means that there are ways that or things that have not been offered to women in our cities in order so they can look for that other hand that can help them. Let me give you.
I'm going to go to the next question.
Very, very quick.
I'm going to go to the next question because we are running out of time. Felipe, do not make me arm wrestle you. We have a table. We can do it. If my hand goes down
I know how
first,
you are. Yes,
you can continue.
Ahead.
All right. Only because it is their conference too.
It's Arturo.
All right.
Go ahead, Arturo.
Please, good question.
My name
Next
is Arturo. Yes. Thank you, Felipe. I work here at the World Bank with the MENA region, Middle East and Northern Africa. And the island of Malta, the Republic of Malta, is actually mapped to MENA, not to Europe. And their public transport reform, first the question, are there free lunches? And it links with what Felipe was saying in the last, like 2 minutes ago. The sense that the Malta public transport reform is very well documented in the literature, mainly by women academics. And you see there that before the reform, when it was competition in the market, the drivers folded as mechanics, they worked 18 hours a day, and they had the typical US school bus transformed into a public transport, just like in the developing world. But then to join the European Union demands reform. You need to go for competition for the market and formalization. Now, the public transport operator in Malta employs 1,300 people, from 300 to 1,300. Well paid, well remunerated, formally, with all the benefits. So are there free lunches? Is it the cost-benefit? Is the cost-benefit analysis of formalizing public transport? And Felipe, for you especially, because you were CEO of Transmilenio in Bogota. Bogota has now, my hometown, by the way, formalized its public transport, and people are surprised that the bill went up on your point of financing. Of course, formalization costs, and somebody has to pay, but does the cost-benefit add up? Are there free lunches? Thank you.
Next question.
My name is Kevin Heaslip from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I have a question about free-falling costs of lithium-ion batteries and the introduction of a $10,000 vehicle by BYD that's come out, and what the effects that would be on the building of these jobs for the support of electric vehicles, and if those two pieces of information serve as a catalyst for building the market pressure away from luxury vehicles to mass market vehicles? Thank you.
Thank you. And final question.
Thank you very much. I'm Adnan Hassan. I live on a small island in the Caribbean called Bonaire. I have been surprised that we've not heard enough about the issues of mobility on small islands that are the most impacted by climate. What's our thinking on mobility on small places?
That's a good one. Can you come back to the microphone? What do you think?
I'm an investor. I'm investing in them. I actually think they are the most interesting places to bring about changes. You can do it in a short period of time. You don't need to wait 15 years. You can do it in 3.
You've answered your own question expertly. Thank you. Andy.
No, I mean, look.
My question was, why is that not a topic? There was no island Caribbean discussion.
Yeah, but I did talk about that because so I spent 5 years living in the Caribbean, and so I know that the Caribbean is prime for having mini grids that can basically charge batteries all day long. And the Caribbean has no shortage of two-wheelers and people riding around on their two-wheelers. So that right there in and of itself is an easy, clean transport solution, because if you're having a battery you don't even need baseload power to charge these batteries all day long and use them on two-wheelers if you really needed to do that. But hopefully you've got grid power. I think the Caribbean is going to be interesting for looking at the development of long duration battery storage, because it's different than a lot of the other places. And I think it could be that, like, my view is when you look at long duration battery storage, and for people who don't know what that is, you hear about battery or long duration energy storage. You hear about batteries, lithium ion, that's usually gets you like maybe up to 4 hours, maybe 8 hours, other things. But the long duration stuff is looking at things that get you 8 hours and beyond, and newer technologies. The Caribbean is going to be the place where you're going to be trying to develop those technologies, because there's offtake, there's markets for that type of thing. There's big tourist hotels and help drive down the cost curve.
And clean green hydrogen with wind and solar.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's going to be clean green hydrogen. It could be some other technology. If you go on the Long Duration Energy Storage Council's website, you'll see like 30 different technologies that none of us will understand, but some of these are probably going to take off. And those are going to be, I think the Caribbean is going to be the place where you're going to see that probably get commercialized at some point.
But it was not a topic, you brought it up, but in terms of the design of the event, wonderful, super interesting.
Which brings me to the point of tomorrow, you will get a survey.
Okay.
And in that survey, I know exactly.
I think you already know it now.
What is going to be in that survey. Do not think, oh, I won't answer this email. Answer the email, and that goes for everybody. Please fill in the survey. Thank you, sir, for your question. Thank you for those questions. And Felipe is going to answer all of those questions in 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. So Arturo, no, there is no free lunch, definitely. And we need to find a subsidy for being able to make this possible. Like, if we want quality, that costs, and that's unfortunate, yes. But if we want quality, if we want more jobs, if we want formality, if we want to be able to access, give more access for our people, we need more subsidy. I'm really happy to hear yesterday from Maria Constanza, the Vice Minister of Colombia, that actually the national government is looking for tools in order to be able to subsidize the small cities, because that's the only way we can improve quality in our cities.
Gentlemen, thank you for making us think on the last hour of our conference, Rethinking Mobility for More and Better Jobs. I would love to spend more time with you, which is always a good sign of a great conversation. Please thank Plenary 5. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You may leave the stage. Thank you. Great job. Appreciate you. Thank you, Andy. Julio Samsi, thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate you. It's always great to be able to introduce the Schipper Memorial Scholarship Award. We are going to be in award mode for the next 15 minutes. So I'm going to invite Holger Dalkman, Senior Advisor, High Volume
evening, everyone. My name is Eileen Perry. I'm not older, but I'm going to say just a brief word. Thank you for joining us, the penultimate session of TT this year to honor Lee Schipper's memory as we all get settled. Many of you knew Lee as a giant in his field. I remember him most as a kind mentor. January 2010, I had just moved to DC to start a new job at WRI's Embark program. I was attending TRB for the first time, feeling a bit overwhelmed. But after a session on transport in developing countries, an older gentleman came up to me and introduced himself because my name tag said I worked at Embark. It was Lee, of course, and I was now part of his extended Embark family, and he was very generous with his time. He went out of his way to introduce me to people in the session as if I had known him for years. He even invited me to a reception at his house. I was brand new to the city and the organization, and Lee welcomed me very warmly. I certainly came to appreciate his transport emissions expertise, as many of you did, but mostly I remember him as a person who took time to make a young professional feel valued and welcomed. So now in its 12th year, can we go to the next slide? We're in our 12th year of the Lee Schipper Memorial Scholarship in Sustainable Transport and Energy Efficiency. This allows us to continue Lee's legacy of mentoring young researchers. Each year we award up to 3 scholarships, including one to a young African scholar. This year's call is open until April 15th, so please help us spread the word. Feel free to reach out with any questions to Holger, myself, or Ramon, who couldn't be here today. I want to briefly acknowledge the scholarship board members. Sam Zimmerman's here, Nancy Keat, Dario Hidalgo, Wei Xuan Ong, along with Joanna Moody and Wesley Ohl for all of their time. Special thank you to WRI, World Bank, Shell Foundation, and VREF for their continued support. So now Holger Dalkman, he co-founded the scholarship, it leads the board, and he has the pleasure of introducing the 2023 scholars. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks also Eileen. The reason also why Eileen also gave that speech, you don't want to hear me every year also talking about Lee, but also she's actually really also great supporter, so really also getting us as a scholarship running. So thanks Eileen also for all your efforts. Before I actually introduce us as the scholars, just also let me send best wishes also to Ramon Munoz Raskin, who is not just as a colleague but at the World Bank and the co-founder, but also a dear friend. And so, Ramon, I hope you see this and best of luck. So we really think all about you. With that, we like to go to the first caller, and I hope also we have somebody online. No, we don't. So, well, we're always flexible. Oh, we have. So okay, I hope also she has some slides. So really welcome also Shanshan Liu. She's a PhD candidate in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at the University of Illinois. And Shanshan actually is talking about assessing electric school buses benefits, enhancing resilience in community hubs. So bringing also the resilience aspects to that. So Shanshan, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, I'm Shanshan Liu from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I'm glad to share with you my research assessing electric school buses benefits, enhancing resilience in community hubs. The increasing number of natural hazards cause large-scale power outage events that significantly affect the societal functions and the regional economies. And resilience hubs or community hubs are solutions serving as shelters for the community during these outages. In this research, we chose the secondary schools as the ideal resilience hub locations, and we assess the resilience of the school with vehicle-to-building equipped electric school buses as backup power during the power outages. Firstly, we analyzed the electric school buses distribution and energy use in the secondary schools in the 9 climate regions in the US. We found that only 6 climate regions have the committed electric school buses. In this presentation, we will focus on the Baltimore and Houston to showcase the effect of the combination of electric school buses and the resilience hubs. To assess whether using electric school buses for backup power at resilience hubs, we need to quantify how much power they can provide in service to the building and how much power they need to maintain to serve as buses to get the children home. Here we present the operation, charging, and idle time of electric school buses. This means that electric school buses can only provide the vehicle-to-building service during the idle time slot. In Baltimore, we have 29 electric school buses, and we assume that they have chargers with 60 kilowatts, and the average of their route length is 35 miles. So the power supply is enough in spring, summer, and autumn in Baltimore. However, in the winter, during 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., electric school buses can only cover part of the energy needs of this resilience hub. So here is the main findings in Baltimore. We found that during summer daytime, if electric school buses are idle, they ensure school and mobility resilience 100%. However, in winter, due to the higher energy demands, electric school buses typically power the school for only 1 hour, but for mobility resilience is maintained. And compared to diesel generators, electric school buses can save up to more than 2,000 kilograms of carbon emissions. And in Houston, they only have 25 electric school buses. And compared to the results in Baltimore, the resilience of the community hubs in winter overperformed the one in summer. And the vehicle-to-building service can save less carbon emissions because of shorter supporting time via vehicle-to-building service. So here is the conclusion of this research. Although electric school buses are beneficial for community hubs during power outages, but the adoption of them are not enough for longer outage duration. And strategies to improve the building efficiency would be promising to enhance the resilience. And electric school buses can significantly decrease the carbon emissions compared to the diesel generators, but we need to consider their charging schedule in the future. In the future, we can consider the charger deployments, charging and discharging schedule of the electric school buses to improve the resilience of community hubs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shanshan. So our next scholar is, in fact, the African scholarship. So it's Owen Rowler. I would also mess your name up. Apologies also for that. Owen is a PhD candidate in civil engineering department at the University of Cape Town. And his PhD is about optimal routes network design and the case study of Nairobi Metropolitan. So Owen, come here. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
You can give him applause.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. And we had a very interesting conversation with a paratransit professionalization conversation. And I think part of the output is what I'm going to present here. So basically, Nairobi has matatus as cooperatives. These are the small minibuses. We also have the TMCs, which are more advanced, the bigger buses, and 40% of this of the commuters do walk. So, what are the benefits and challenges of this system? There is a provision of affordable services for the commuters, and is also a source of employment. What are the social costs and the operational cost? There's an inefficiency in the use of infrastructure. There's safety issues due to the business models used. and also the environmental impacts due to the type of vehicles that they use, and also the labor issues. We've seen that conversation go through right now. And then is an opportunity for corruption, and the cost of corruption would be worth investigating for most of the scholars here. And my approach has looked at the cost, and from the presentation we've just had from the different panelists, they said cost will be the most impactful way to look at these systems. And I've looked at the network, I've looked at the demand, and I've looked at the economies of this, and I've realized that if we don't look at the actual cost of these systems and what savings the different operators, what savings the commuters do receive out of this system, then you're going to be in trouble going forward. So in my simulation, I looked at the travel demand changes, which I looked at the network performance and evaluated the different perspectives with different scenarios, looking at the number of transfers in the system. I chose a specific route or a specific corridor and looked at the capital cost, the operation and maintenance cost, and other costs, and then iterated this through and through. And with different scenarios, I was able to look at the length, alignment, stops, number of terminals that the services that you find in that route do serve, the number of vehicles, the characteristics of the vehicles, if they were EVs or if they were smaller buses or bigger buses. And all this spoke to the supply. How many vehicles do you find in that route? How many vehicles that each association have? And what is the impact of all this operation from both a commuter perspective and an operator perspective? And at the end of it, with all these scenarios, and you can see in the baseline, I was trying to look at the cost improvements, both from these parties, from all these stakeholders. And in the middle is a case where you have the full system electrified. And now that we are looking at financing, how do we actually bring this system to the third scenario, where you have a very good mix that talks to people's models and how much money they put back to their pockets. So with all this, my results speak to that at the end of the day, you need a proper mix. You need to think through what benefits go back to the people, how much they're able to recoup out of the system, how much savings they save at the end of the day out of the operations, how many vehicles you need to operate in each route. And government needs to look at how the business models that are adopted by the operators and the different transport management companies into what exactly will they go home with, because that is what matters for them. So future directions for this work, it will be interesting to look at the sensitivities around the labor laws that have just been talked about. I'll just link in the quality service to the quality jobs. Also, there is no free lunch. There's need to subsidize these systems. We need to look at the business models for EV adoption, the total cost of ownership. Energy transition will not be easy in some cases, context-specific cases. In the case of South Africa might be different. In the case of West African cities might be different. But also need to look at the climate impact of all these, of the full economy of the vehicles in the African context. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Owen. And if you look for new talents in your companies, in your universities, in your banks, so Owen, as well as also the gentleman I will introduce in a minute, also are soon finished, or in fact also already finished there's a PhD and is looking for a job. So get to them also afterwards. So with that, I also like to introduce and congratulations also for your recent PhD, Carlos Rivera Gonzalez. You have a PhD in transport engineering at the Polytechnical Institute in New York, and you will talk about transforming urban logistics, demand-centric policy impact on freight-efficient land uses. So the floor is yours.
Well, hello everyone. It's an entire pleasure to be presenting my research here. So once the slides go up, I'll start. Perfect. Thank you so much. So then let us begin. So as all of you are aware, freight transportation, it is a key element for the economic growth of sustainability and economic growth for like metropolitan areas and nations. But at the same time, the transportation sector is one of the ones that produce the most greenhouse gas emissions. So in the case of Canada, it's for almost 1/4. So depending on who you're asking with, they are going to portray two different perspectives about freight transportation. Simultaneously, something that happens, it is that in cities, actually zoning, it determines where the economic activities they can be located and where they are going to operate. And ideally, you would like to promote synergies between complementary land use types. So then planners, actually, they have to face this really daunting question of how are we going to organize our territory. So this question actually should look like a chessboard game in which you have to be really strategical. Where are you going to put your residential, commercial, and industrial land use types? So the main insight between zoning and freight transportation, it is that actually depending on where do you locate your distribution center is going to have significant impacts on the efficiency of the supply chain, but as well on the subsequent tours that go from the distribution center to the receivers of the cargo. So the research question that we had in this project, it was, are optimal locations for distribution centers sensitive to the changes on demand management policies? So demand management policies, it is how we can change the behavior of the receivers of the cargo in order to improve the efficiency of the supply chain. In this case in particular, we did it for the case of off-hour deliveries. That is, what if we do the deliveries in the off hours rather than the morning peak hours? And the reason why this is important, it is actually because land use changes, they can take several years to achieve their benefits. Nonetheless, actually, demand management policies, actually, they can take almost an instantaneous impact. We evaluated this actually on the framework of freight efficient land uses, in which we use a bi-level mathematical optimization model that I developed when I was doing my PhD. And we were minimizing something called environmental cost. So the environmental cost is the summation of three components. The first one is the location cost of renting a distribution center. The second one, the operational cost of distributing the cargo. And the last one, actually, it's evaluation of emissions. So in this case in particular, we did it for greenhouse gases, PM 2.5, and NOx. Regarding the case study, actually, we did it for the city of Toronto, the metropolitan area, in which we had 6 different data sources, in which all of them actually come together as inputs in order to find where would be the optimal location. And we did it for a facility that it was handling 26,000 daily deliveries in the city of Toronto. Regarding results, the first thing that we did, it was developing an econometric model in order to model the demand, that it would be the total number of freight trips attracted. And once we had that, in addition to the 6 inputs that I showed before, we actually ran the model for 2 different time conditions. The first one, it was the morning peak conditions, that is the map that you see on the middle, and then the map that you see on the right is the overnight hours. So actually, the main insight is actually, well, the optimal location changes. So in the map on the middle, that is the morning peak hours, it's located in the northwestern part of the city. However, on the overnight hours, it is more on a central location that is similar to a hub and spoke network. Actually, in that location, it's easier to do the deliveries. But as well, I want to point out actually the differences in the magnitudes on the environmental cost. So now talking about seeing key insight, and something that I want you to remember is actually how freight demand management strategies, they can play a key role in order to achieve sustainable urban freight. In the overnight hours, we found how they were having fewer vehicles, longer tours, shorter travel times, and fewer global emissions. In particular, in the overnight hours, there was a 17% reduction of the environmental cost on a per kilometer basis. Tours were 33% longer in the overnight hours. As well, we found this 21% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions on a per kilometer basis, but as well, there was a 26% increase on the PM 2.5 on the per kilometer basis. And actually, this what is showing is this dichotomy that we have between global pollutants and local pollutants. Lastly, instead of the typical predict and provide approach on planning, actually, we should use the current infrastructure that we have in a more efficient way. Talking about policy implications, we believe that there is no silver bullet solution. Actually, there should be complementary policies in order to achieve a sustainable urban freight. So, we should reimagine the use of urban spaces in addition, for instance, to the electrification of cargo. Special thanks to Professor Matt Roda from the University of Toronto, from Jose Holguin Veras from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, from which I developed the mathematical model, and from Wei-Shun Eng. Thank you so much, and if you want to connect.
So
Thank you very much. Thanks also particular to WI and the World Bank also giving also the young scholars every year again also the opportunity and the scholarship. So really much appreciate that. And then I hand over to you and we can probably just make a quick photo if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
You need to document this moment. Thank you. Excellent.
Okay. All right. Okay.
You're so welcome. Congratulations. Before the close, I get to celebrate you. How are your voices? Oh, do we have a doctor in the house? How are your voices? You're okay? Okay, all right, great, because I want you to cheer yourselves. If you were wondering why it was taking so long to get a coffee or a tea, that was because 1,000 of us have been in this conference in person. Online, we've had about 1,840, actually exactly 1,840 participating online, and World Bank Live yesterday and today, 80,000, so that's 160,000 people being part of TT online. On social media, 4,700 social interactions. That means that we had about 13 million impressions. I know you've been busy talking to each other and networking. Do go online, look for TTDC24, and then you can catch up on all of the pictures, the comments, and the discussions that have been happening online. Did I mention that there's a survey coming out tomorrow? Did I? Okay. Please fill that in. We'd really appreciate it. I would like you just to stand up and stretch your legs. Thank you. So you're ready for the closing remarks. Take this hand and do it, move it to this hand. And then just do it quicker. All right. What is for you? You've made it through to the second day and the afternoon. Thank you. Please be seated. Just in time to hear Nicolas Peltier. He's the Transport Global Director of the World Bank, and Rogier Vandenberg, Global Director, WRI, Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. They are going to close this conference in style. Thank you, gentlemen.
Good partners for 21 years, right?
Oh, yes. And 20 more to come. All right. Well, what an exciting 2 days. This 21st year of TT. This 21st year of TT has brought together so much energy, inspiring stories, and exciting ideas about how we can transform transportation to make it cleaner, safer, more inclusive, and more resilient, but also how we can finance this transformation. It was great to see such a variety of leaders and practitioners from all around the world, both on stage and in the audience. This diversity of perspectives is the hallmark of TT and one of the main reasons why this event brings so much value to the global conversation on sustainable transport. A good illustration of this diversity of views is the conversation that we heard yesterday. I'm sure you remember this one, between our two remarkable champions of sustainable mobility, Claudia Lopez and Patrick Ashe. We heard from the former mayor of Bogota how land use policies, public transportation, active mobility, and planning transportation through the eyes of women can help transform cities and offer clean and inclusive transport solutions to the urban population. The former Prime Minister of Côte d'Ivoire reminded us that in rural areas, development often starts with a road, and that 1 billion people in the world still lack access to an all-weather road. We've heard this morning another great conversation between the ministers of Chile, Lesotho, and Malawi, who emphasized the growing synergies between transport, energy, urban development, and agriculture, but also provided vivid examples of what resilient transport means for their countries. And I'm sure that you also have been moved like me by Senator Crystal Asille's powerful speech about the need to make transport accessible to all. Our conference focus was about how we can bridge the financing gap for sustainable transport. In plenaries and side events, many examples, ideas, and ambitions were discussed, such as India's e-mobility program, risk sharing and blended finance instruments, how transport can access green finance and carbon markets, and how seed money can help accelerate the shift of transport investments towards sustainable and zero-emission solutions, such as active mobility. At the World Bank, we are excited to support our clients and partners on this journey by leveraging our expertise, our convening power, and our balance sheet. Our transport portfolio is quickly shifting toward low-carbon and resilient solutions, and we are currently developing a wide range of innovating projects in areas like electric mobility, mass transit, active mobility, rail, shipping, and green logistics. But we are eager to do more to advance sustainable transport in developing countries. This requires a collective effort to accelerate the shift toward clean, safe, inclusive, and resilient transport. And we look forward to partnering with all of you to develop and implement the solutions that are the best suited for countries in the developing world. Our evolution roadmap will help adapting our financing instruments to maximize impacts, such as through the ramping up of our guarantee products. The Global Facility to Decarbonize Transport and our Global Road Safety Facility have been specifically designed to generate a pipeline of well-designed sustainable transport programs, and we invite more financing partners to join and support these two initiatives. The stories our participants have shared on the TT stage tell us one thing. While the road to sustainable transport won't always be a smooth one, change is possible. But if we want to mobilize the massive amounts of resources that will be needed to make this happen, we need to rethink our approach to transport financing in a fundamental way and embrace new business models. Although we are wrapping up the core 2 days of TT, the conversation is far from over. We have several additional transport events scheduled for the rest of the week. Beyond that, I know that all of you, once you travel back from the conference, will continue to work hard in an effort to promote a greener, more sustainable approach to transport. It's not easy to convene this many passionate people for this type of event. I would be remiss if I did not thank our partners at the WRI Rose Center for Sustainable Cities for their long-standing partnership. And again, Roger, it has been an absolute pleasure to partner one more year to organize this TT. I also want to express my gratitude for our joint team for working endless hours over many months to put this program together. You can see all the names on the screen just now. We usually say that it takes a village to put an event such as this one together. I want to thank Femi, our fearless moderator, and we couldn't do this without her. Thank you for keeping us on schedule. And every year we learn one thing about you. This year that you are arm wrestling as well, so another skill. And finally, thank you to all of you, our guest speakers and audience, for bringing your energy and your curiosity from near and far. And we look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicolas. And how are we doing? Yeah, good. Because I'm doing very well, because I got really energized. And this is the best conference every year, really. And you think that we're saying that always, but it is, right? It's a really powerful community. It's fantastic to see so many friends and partners. I keep it short, like Nicolas, but we want to reflect on a few things that came to the surface. And what is nice after 21 years of organizing this together with the World Bank is that you see the shifts in the conversation, you know? And this year, there's a couple of things that I want to mention. One is that a real focus on system change, you know, to really transform the transport sector and take a holistic view. You know, what is this kind of multi-modal approach that we are talking about, and how do you actually implement it? I loved Chile's Minister of Transport and Telecommunications view from Juan Carlos Muñoz, who said that transportation needs to be designed as a system creating connections, such as between bikes and buses. We talked quite a lot on these kind of feeder lines and how do you actually make sure that the investment in public transportation are actually right, and that you can feed them and that you can fill these systems that have a very difficult time at this moment. And we also heard that from Vijay Kumar from Niti Aayog from India, that 9 cities, high-density cities in India, actually piloted e-bus programs. And these cities' successes showed India that it's actually much less risky than they thought. And in that sense, this kind of transformation of e-buses in cities can help to drive the national ambition and national climate action. And cities that are at the heart of that, right? And aggregating demand and bringing the demand from cities together in national ambitions is an absolute opportunity for us. And this is where we're talking about finance better, get a better price, and develop electrification at scale. So while being successful, I think it's our common responsibility towards Belém, COP30 in Belém, to make sure that our countries and organizations set sectoral targets on transportation in the NDCs. And we need to promise each other that we do everything to go after that, because that will tell us and that will tell the countries where to go to. The second point, and I'm a Dutchman, and I cycled my whole life, and I have a cargo bike right now in which I put all my kids. Active mobility, key. This is not an add-on, right? It's a structural element of our cities. It's a structural element of our transportation system. So we learned that active mobility is not ancillary to transport agenda, but it's very powerful and complementary. Active mobility infrastructure is also cheaper for investors and cheaper for the users. And best of all, active mobility does not require decarbonization. This is what we heard many, many times. I also enjoyed, we had, of course, nice side events. We had a great roundtable on active mobility. Needs to come back next year. I'm already doing the post-mortem, Nicolas. It needs to come back next year because we need to understand, and thanks for the Netherlands organizing this, we need to understand not only how to implement it, but structurally finance it, targeted finance to active mobility, to cycling and walking. Inclusion. So all people, regardless of age and gender, should have freedom to move. And we really must increase inclusion and accessibility for women and vulnerable populations. We need to build transport for everyone and especially continue to invest in cycling lanes, walkways, as I said, and other active mobility related infrastructure. And I really loved the speech of Senator Crystal Asige from Kenya. Are you still around? I saw you. Yes, thank you very much for inspiring us. Because you are a real inspiration to show that accessibility is crucial for creating inclusive, sustainable transportation. And we did, the WRI is a very data-savvy organization, as many of you know, but it's estimated that over 46% of people over 60 will be categorized as disabled by 2030. So we really need to take this very seriously. And it's also an opportunity because it will fill up our transport systems and make public transportation, for example, cheaper. It will drive down the cost. The fourth point is about activating markets. Every conference like this will end. We need the private sector, right? We all know this. That's what we all say in the end. But I think that the capital and the opportunities that you have as the World Bank in terms of guarantees, but also the limited philanthropic money that is there and the grant finance can help us to catalyze private sector investment. And Paul Butler from the Bezos Earth Fund eloquently mentioned that we really haven't activated market forces yet that drive broad, deep transformative change in the global economy. And we need to combine government capital with a limited philanthropic capital, as I said, to bring private sector on board and to de-risk their investments. Last point, don't worry. I'm still excited, right? I know I'm standing here, you know, you're sitting there. I'm standing between, you know, you and the drinks. But infrastructure and land use. So if there's, you know, 75% of the infrastructure still needs to be built. And the question is, what form and shape do our cities where we invest in actually get, right? Will it drive sprawl or will we make more livable, compact places where you can walk, cycle, and where our kids can move freely and safely from A to B? Claudia Lopez, and we're very proud that she's on the WI Ross Center board, and as a former mayor of Bogota, reminded us that we need to prioritize the areas of investment that shape the places that we want to live in, and therefore, investments and finance towards the transport system should go hand in hand with land use and land acquisition. Without that link, it's going to be empty public transportation and it's going to be sprawling cities. So how we create this more compact opportunity for our cities that is front and center. I think safety is extremely important. Safety, we had a fantastic panel that talked about road safety and how crucial speed limitation is. And we need to all take that very, very seriously. Traffic fatalities are still the number one death cost for kids and teenagers. And we can't allow that, right? And 92% of these traffic fatalities take place in lower and middle income countries. So we all have a responsibility to address that. Okay, I've said enough. I'm still energized. I'm excited. I think together we can do a lot. There's two things you should take home. All the lessons here, apply them and help us to drive transport as a main opportunity for sustainable development. And the second, it's a deep promise to come back next year, right? Because this is what makes the conference very powerful. Are we having once more, the slide with the names? Because I really want to thank Nicolas. I really want to thank Ben, the World Bank, everybody that's involved. It is a very stressful operation to make this happen. Very stressful operation. So thanks to all the teams that did the work and that made you have a great conference. And I'm looking forward to number 22 next year. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Right.